Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. Man, we've got another rock star guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. The hits just keep on coming, folks. This guy's an entrepreneur, trader, yogi. I have no idea what a yogi is. I think, he's probably going to tell me. So, but you can find him on Instagram at Clay B. Hodges, Hodges. You can also find his company, the Ronin Forex Group, RoninForexGroup.com, RoninForexGroup.com. But you can find Clay Hodges right here, right now on the Intentional Encourage podcast. Clay, what's good?
Brian, what's up, man? Smash the intro.
Well, again, the rest of the conversation may go sideways a little bit, but as long as we can get the intro good, that's a good thing. Clay, let's start here.
Okay.
The world as we know it has been topsy-turvy the last 20 months. Everything that we thought we knew, things like that, has kind of gone haywire, things like that. Take me through the last 20 months or so since the pandemic started March of last year. How has it impacted you? And maybe give me a lesson that you learned from it that you're going to implement going forward in your business and life. Maybe there was some kind of that aha moment that you had. You're like, man, I'm going to do this from now on.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, man, I think that question, so many people could benefit from and probably reflect about it. Cause there's so many things right now that are beyond our control. So, my journey when this whole, whatever's going on, I don't know what's going on. Nobody really does. There's so much, disinformation and different sides arguing. Nobody knows what the truth is. And so but at the start, just like everybody, I was pretty scared and, I didn't know what was happening. And I was very fearful for my parents and stuff too, who are older. And, and so I got sucked into, the 24-hour news cycle, then the different conspiracy theories, trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. And, the first part, mid part of last year, I hit a super dark, I guess you'd say, depression because I was in Nashville and I found out you were in Huntington, West Virginia. So I'm originally from Kentucky, right? So Bowling Green, outside of there, my family has a farm like Alvaton, which you probably know.
Yep.
So I went up there to stay because everything was shut down here and you weren't supposed to go out or all that stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, at least I'll go out, take my dog up there. We can hang out. So, but next thing you know, I've been there for 2 months and not going out, just kind of really just over the hump of the initial what's going on here, plus all the markets crashed and stuff. And, so I was navigating with that with my business and I definitely hit a rough spot of just depression, anxiety, and had to come to a realization that there are only so many things. It doesn't matter what's going on, if it is a pandemic or earthquake or whatever, there's only so many things I can control. And what are those things? Even if my business is off the rails or relationships or whatever, the few things that are in my power are, my body, the way I'm feeling, my mind. And then from there, it's a bit of a spiritual connection. I think that's different for everybody. But, I had to come to the realization that sitting here, watching all this news, watching this, fear mongering that's coming on, I had to realize that the people putting that out, either if it's, I agree with it or I don't agree with it, it's designed to keep me watching so they could keep making money anyways. Right.
No, that's a beautiful point you just hit on. And I'm glad you went there, Clay, because it's almost like bad news is good business. And that's the inverse of the way that business normally is. You mentioned the markets. markets always respond favorably to good news. It's been historically that way since I would say it like this, since God created the stock market, right? And markets always react favorably to good news. They always react unfavorably to bad news. And it's the inverse. And I love what you said there about it was good for their business. But I don't think many of them realized that at some point it was going to become toxic to their business because of what you just said. It's like, wait a minute, that thinking is counterintuitive to the way business actually works, and people are just going to turn you off. Like when people turn you off and shut you down, you're done. You're just done. I want to ask you a little bit about the market, because we saw a lot of things and we saw some things like that. What were you hearing from customers that you were dealing with in your company? If I could go there for a second, what were some of the things you were hearing from people that maybe either surprised you in a good way, or you were like, man, I'm concerned about this? Because, Clay, forgive me for the long-winded question. Some people might have taken, like I heard people say, when people are selling, I'm buying, because if they're going to panic, I'm going to take advantage of their panic. I'm gonna buy when everybody else is selling. Am I making sense there about?
Yeah, for sure. So that's Warren Buffett. I believe he said the best time to buy is when there's blood in the streets.
That's what I would listen to Warren Buffett. I mean, dude's 93 years old and still making money hand over fist. I'd probably listen to him.
Who knows? But so there's a couple parts to that question. One, but just to get back, I think, thankfully, in my opinion, I believe the pendulum is swinging back the other way. That the biggest part, or one of the biggest problems or issues going on in our country that nobody's talking about, from just an overall point of view, is the complete loss of any trust whatsoever in pretty much all the institutions. So government, for sure, nobody trusts. Well, if they're talking, my uncle has saying, if she's talking, she's lying.
That's what they used to say about salespeople, man. If they're lying, if their lips are moving, they're lying.
Yes, yeah, for the definitely one that with bad intentions, but which the government now, it seems like, all the bailouts, all that stuff, $5 trillion of stimulus, $5 trillion. It's actually more than that.
Well, let's go there for a second, because I love where you're taking the conversation, because markets are built on trust. Business is built on trust. If the marketplace doesn't trust the offering that you have, it doesn't matter how good you think it is. If the marketplace doesn't trust it, they're not going to be receptive to it. And I love what you said there about people trying to overinflate what most normal people were seeing. Like, I could see it with my own eyes, and people are like, oh no, it's not that bad. You should trust, you should trust it. And people are going, but no, the Dow continues to go backwards on a daily basis. What I'm seeing with my eyes is counterintuitive to what I'm hearing with my ears. I'd rather trust my eyes in that situation. When you think about that, and I love what you said about trust, how does the market regain the trust of people that want to invest in the market?
Well, man, so there's a lot there. So it's not just the market loss of trust, loss of government, loss of elections potentially for a lot of people, which is like, well, basically we don't have a country if people don't believe the elections are real. I'm not saying one thing or the other. I like where you're heading there. Keep going there. Right. Okay. And so then the biggest culprit of them all is, you have the propaganda machine, which is the news cycle, which, like I said, I feel like the pendulum is swinging the other way. So now people are just turning it off. I'm not the only one that just was just hook, line, and sinker last year.
Yeah.
It started to affect them mentally. It started to affect their business. It started to affect them spiritually, or maybe even physically, just you start to go down that living in that bad energy and stuff, and it affects you for long enough. And I think a lot of people are starting to just be like, I'm turning it off. That's like the conversation I have with my clients and my friends and my family. It's like, don't even tune in. It's hard enough watching a football game and they start talking politics. It's like, what are these people doing? Like,
yeah. And again, you're 100% right. It all circles back to trust, Clay. And that's the thing is, and I love where you're taking us in this conversation, because I feel like that a lot of people, and this is why this podcast exists, is because when you see something over there that just doesn't look right, you want to be encouraged that that's not the way it's always going to be. That's not but because if you looked at it, and let's stay with the market for a second. If you looked at the market at where it was and said, okay, this is the way it's going to be, then you don't know historically how the market acts and reacts. We've been in these down cycles before where there has been panic selling, where the market is just acting abnormally. And that's what we saw last year, was an abnormal act of the market. But if you take a historical look and you go, okay, well, there's things that I know about the market that I see that these trends have happened in the past, and now all of a sudden you start to get that confidence back because people will start to come to their senses and they realize, okay, this is the way, this is what I'm seeing is not the way, it's an aberration. And that trust comes back. Let me finish that thought there, because I love, again, man, you're pinpointing it in this part. When we talk about rebuilding trust, and you think about that from a financial standpoint, what has to happen for the American people to trust finances and trust the market again and trust it because the market was cooking before the pandemic hit. I mean, man, it was rocking before the pandemic hit. So how do we rebuild that trust in the market again?
And then, I mean, it's worth pointing out, after the pandemic was an even big, or after it all just came tumbling down in March, right? After that, March of 2020. After that, there's the biggest recovery in history. And so this is where I believe that, pretty much all the trust has been, I don't know if you can get it back, man, to be honest. The biggest culprit here is the Federal Reserve, who is the one that's actually pulling all the levers on what's happening and running the show. So to get back to the last part of that, all this stimulus, the 5 trillion plus, and I've been kind of ranting a little bit, to some of my followers about this. First of all, the 5 trillion, I don't know where it went. I just looked outside here because I would expect it to be paved in gold, because think of it this way. So you say 5 trillion and people are like, oh, 5 trillion, da, 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 da. And it's become a talking point that people are like, okay, yeah, 5 trillion. But so 1 trillion is 999 billion plus one more billion, right?
Yeah.
Most people, I think I can kind of wrap my head what it might be around, what it might be like to have $1 billion. But it's difficult to do in reality. 10 billion, it just becomes it's not even real. 20 billion, $100 billion is you can't, it's mind boggling, to fathom what that actually is and what it means. So would be 100 billion. So make that 1 trillion. So it'd be 999 plus 1 billion. That would be 1 trillion. Now add 5 more of those. It becomes a thing where it's how many grains of sand are there in Panama City Beach?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing too, to close this part of the conversation, to your point, when Apple became the first company to market cap at over $1 trillion, that was huge news. And you're talking about 5 Apples, 5 Apple corporations in a stimulus package, in a spending bill, that people were just, you're 100% right. And it's that kind of perspective that is so good. Let's step aside, take a break. We're going to continue this part of the conversation because what Clay's talking about is really important. And in just a little bit, we're going to get into his story. Incredible story of overcoming addiction. Man, this is so good. We could spend 3 hours talking about this, but we want to condense it. Keep going with the conversation. My guest, Clay Hodges, joining me on the Intentional Courage podcast. Back here in just a moment.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now what's that, you might say? Well, search engine optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote.
Clay, we talked about that before the break. Man, you're really giving this audience an MBA level lesson. In those short sentences, you're giving us such an MBA lesson in how to think about what's happening. So let's go here for a second. As an entrepreneur, and I want you to put your entrepreneur hat on for a second and talk to those people that have small businesses and things like that. What's something that we can do to keep ourselves thinking ahead of where the government's thinking? And again, I'm not trying to get political, but how do you stay a step ahead when everything points to you're going to do this, you're going to do that, your business is going to be impacted, supply chain issues? How do entrepreneurs stay one step ahead?
I think, for me, it's by being able to do my best to become a master of my own life. So that's like removing all vices, which, for me which you alluded to, alcohol, drugs, for people that are just tuning in or whatever, I grew up in rural Kentucky and you're from West Virginia. And so back in the 90s and pain clinics were everywhere. That was the norm. So that took over my life for a long time. So now after I've gotten, been clean from that and then built a business and regained my health and mind. And this is what I had to get back to last year when I felt like my sanity was kind of going off the rails with this whole pandemic thing. I was like, okay, what are the few things that I control? My health, what I'm putting in my body, what I'm listening to. And so what I'm getting at for an entrepreneur, it's great if you can pull all these levers around you, but at the end of the day, if you can't really control what's going on here, you have a weak. I'm just saying I'm just talking about myself. Fingers. You're on a weak foundation. Now, if we can just rebuild ourselves, and this is what I believe would actually rebuild this country as a whole and the world, is that, if we can put the focus instead on what everybody else is doing, the government should do this, they should do that. This group of people that identify as this is what they should be doing. It's like, no. Who cares what any of those people are doing? This is what I should be doing right now. This is what I should be doing. I need to, if I look in the mirror and I see that, 40 pounds overweight, 50 pounds overweight, and it's like, 2022 is coming around the corner. I guess I'm going to make that resolution and tell my wife that, I'm going to lose 40 pounds this year. And, she's going to be like,
you've been eavesdropping in our conversation. You've been eavesdropping in my house, man. Yeah. Have you been wiretapping my house, man?
I have, dude. I have.
Yeah.
But the reaction from people is like, yeah, sure. You said that last year. So what we really need to do is get honest with ourselves about how we can improve the small things, because they're always staring us in the face. Our
and forgive me, as we're recording this, my cell phone rings and it's my wife calling me. So I mean, it's funny, but
she actually hired me, dude.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. That's exactly right. That is a perfect place to pivot, man. And you're just beautifully taking us to really cool places, and I am digging where this conversation's going. Let's go there, and let's go and tell your story, because you're right about Appalachia. And the thing that I've told people when they find out that I live in the Huntington, West Virginia area, for a lot of years, this has been ground zero for the heroin epidemic. 5 years ago in one night, we had 26 people that had to be Narcan. They had to be revived by Narcan. 26 had to be revived, 25 survived, one did not. But our EMS system was taxed that night, Clay. I mean, we made national news from it. And there are a lot of people that life, the pandemic, business not going the way they would want it to go, will take them to those places because they're trying to find an escape and a release. Would you take us to how you ended up in that place? And would you just, this is a great place for you to go ahead and tell your story, because I mean, I love where you took us. And so I want to be mindful and just continue to go there.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, definitely the abridged version, because like this kind of thing, I could talk about forever, but just for anybody that is going through that, and like, God, it's people allude to it, the opiate epidemic, the heroin epidemic, and like, but in reality, pretty much at this point in this country, everybody has, if not themselves, if they're not dealing with some sort of addiction issue, a kid, a spouse, a relative, friend, coworker, somebody is. I would say in like a 1-to-4 ratio, people are affected by that. So, yeah, I mean, for me, it just kind of became the norm growing up where I did. And like, it's not that like, I had tried oxys and all that stuff when I was a kid, which I had when I was 16. It's not like I was boom off to heroin. It was a progression, but it was normalized. And I feel like, drugs are very normalized in our culture, either for good or bad. But you don't hear too many of the horror stories until it's too late, like what you just said. And you definitely don't hear too many people that are like, unless you go to some sort of 12-step meeting or something where people have overcome those kind of things. And like, that's one of the reasons why I decided to come out and tell my story. And, trying to get clean took me all over the country. Like I told you before, I've been through Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, through hiking the Appalachian Trail, and that was in 2010. I did that to get off Dilaudid and morphine, and I was like, I didn't want to go to treatment again. I was like, I don't know what else to do. I'll go out here and hike the trail. And so,
what does it take for Clay? I got to ask you this,
okay?
Because you said, man, I had to hike the Appalachian Trail to get clean, and you're like, I didn't want to go back to treatment again. What does it take in your mind to get to that point to go, enough is enough? Because that man, that's most rational thinking people. And I don't want to offend anybody with this statement. Most rational thinking people who don't have an addiction problem, that's kind of a bucket list thing for them to do, is hike the Appalachian Trail. You were putting this plan together, and you were in the middle of addiction where it was, I'm sure it had to affect your behavior and things like that. How do you get that moment of real granular clarity in the midst of full-on addiction?
Well, I mean, I think, it's more grace than anything when people have a moment of clarity like that. But yeah, just to be clear, I tried to get clean and did from like dope and that kind of thing, but still was drinking on the trail and partying. It was great. But really, so that was how deep my denial was to actually face what was going on the inside. I would rather go and hike 2,000 miles than actually get to the root of the problem. So, but like, it worked for a little bit, you know. So, but then the thing is like that saying, you know, wherever you go, there you are. So, you know, like I eventually it caught up to me, the you know, self-sabotage, the negative mindset, the negative thinking, the compulsive tendencies, I guess you would say. So it's not like it wasn't all bad, and wasn't all like, there's some extreme high points. And then of course, after that, you know, 2012 is when I came back to, after, you know, a series of tragic events and traumatic events, you know, involving Narcan, involving overdoses, involving jail, involving, you know, girlfriend that I'd had to revive, all kinds of stuff, getting beat up. Like this is, I'm just like compiling it all. Like I've been there. For anybody's listening to this, like, you know, heroin, at the end it was heroin, Xanax. I'd have to do coke to, like, you know, or meth to like even function. And I thought I was like kind of just, I thought I was fooling people. And the thing is like, I was just so unwilling to get honest with myself. And, you know, it doesn't have to, the thing is like, you don't have to go to that place of where I was, of like desperation. You call it the gift of desperation. I like to say, you know, the bottom's wherever you decide to quit digging, right? So like for me, you know, I had to learn the hard way, just because that's how I learn. And grateful now for those experiences, because it's helped me to look within, and then turning within so I can find some sort of connection to the world outside of myself. So like getting sucked back into that news cycle last year, like I alluded to, I was getting away from my true inner self. And like the thing is we have to get honest with ourselves. Like one of the last time I went to treatment was like, I had worked previously at the same treatment center. I went there and then I got out, and I like got a yoga teacher's license, and then eventually went back there and started teaching yoga and helping out. And so then after relapse years later, I left and it was back. I was in Colorado, where I'd lived for a long time, and, you know, everything hit the fan. And I was desperate, and I had to call the guy who was like, this is like a pretty militant place. It's like men only, hardcore 12 steps. Is out in like Burns, Tennessee. I don't know if you've ever been out there. It's like middle of nowhere. It's middle of nowhere, you know? So like, and he typically doesn't let people back in. And if you are, you have to stay there for like a year. And so like but I called him desperate, and, you know, he was like, I told him everything that was going on and where I was at. He's like, all right, man, we'll let you back in. But it's time that you start getting honest. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I told my mom what's going on, my dad, you know, I packed everything up. Everybody knows what's happening. I've told, you know, I'm filled everybody in. I'm not hiding anything. He's like, no, Clay, it's time you start getting honest with yourself. And man, you know, that hit me in such a way. I mean, it's a small statement, and for, you know, every now and then somebody will say something to you that's like a truth beyond anything that you could ever even argue with. Like somebody says something that just like knocks you on your heels. All of a sudden you have goosebumps, your hair stands up. And I believe that's like a divine message from somewhere else. You know, somebody speaking just an absolute truth. And when you hear an absolute truth, there is no argument for it, because it's truth. All there really is in this world is truth. And we live in a world of falsehoods. We live in a world of falsehoods, of delusion, of, you know, people trying to, you know, not people, but different influences that take us away from our true connection to that world that the creator made, you know, which is the natural world. And like, we can tap in to that truth. And that every now and then, you know, you're looking at a sunrise and like, you're like, wow, man, this is something bigger than me. Or you look at the stars, and we experience that because it's just the way things really are at the time. So sorry, I went on a little rant.
No, that is beautiful. And what I was, hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Want to tell you about my new book, People Buy from People, 10 Powerful People Lessons from the Ultimate People Person. My dad was one of the greatest connectors that I ever knew. And he shared with me 10 connecting principles that I have used throughout my 25-year sales and sales management, customer engagement, and leadership career that I'm passing along to you. If you want to be a stronger, deeper, and more powerful connector, you've got to pick up a copy of People Buy From People. There are concepts in there that you may not realize help make you a power connector. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, Kindle if you're an e-reader and you like to do it that way, or now available on Audible. And there's one other way you can get a copy of People Buy From People. You can get one from me and I'll sign it for you. You go to intentionalmediaandpublishing@gmail.com and send me an email, and I'll share with you the link on how you can get a signed copy. You can buy a signed copy directly from me. Again, People Buy From People. If you want to connect like never before, pick up your copy today of People Buy From People. And now let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. What I was writing down was hearing an absolute truth, because I would have to think, Clay, and here's where I want to go with our conversation, is that if you could step back in time and you ran into yourself on the Appalachian Trail, what do you think you might, Clay, now in 2021, what do you think you might have said to yourself at that time in your life? Because you were like, man, I think I'm doing the right thing by trying to get clean and hiking. But the truth is, I traded one addiction for another, because you were like, man, I was partying and drinking, and like, well, yeah, it's not as bad as, it's not as bad as heroin. Alcohol is not nearly as bad as heroin. And that's, I say that because, I remember before I had weight loss surgery and I would take my diabetic medication, I look back and I'm like, man, I would stop at the convenience store and get a little pack of chocolate donuts and a Diet Pepsi because it said take medication with food. I was like, well, yeah, of course, I've been taking medication with food. Why not? But what do you think you would have said to yourself in that moment if you now could have gone back then and put your arm around yourself?
Yeah, the level of denial that once we get into that space is just, the lies we tell ourselves are like unbelievable. It seems ridiculous at the time, like looking back, kind of with the, must have with food, like story you alluded to, my denial was like, this is fine. I mean, I was young, immature, and like the path that I was on, trying to work through some stuff, but really at the core of that, I was filled with so much fear that, that my life was out of control, and, I didn't really know what was going to happen. I felt like I wasn't living. I didn't even feel like it. I knew I wasn't living up to my potential, and I still feel like I'm not, but it's something you can always aspire to. And what I would tell, 10 years, 12 years ago, which is crazy, that, man, it's all right. You're taken care of. Like, God's got your back. If your listeners aren't, I don't mean that. And like, I just mean like the universe has got your back, and everything's going to be all right. You're running from whatever it is. You're running from the unknown right now. You're hiking, you believe you're having fun. And on one level you're not, but really you're just, becoming more detached from your true self and the potential that is deep inside. And so I think a lot of people, it just creates this hole that we just try to fill. So for me, it ended up with, Xanax and Valium and whatever I could get my hands on. And I'll just add to that. Now, I've realized that I'll use whatever to get out of that space. Like if I'm going through something that, I don't want to deal with or confront, or just like, I'm not feeling okay. It could be Netflix, it could be food, it could be relationships or sex, or, porn, or whatever it could be, just to be real with everybody out there. I'll use, poker, whatever. And, in the same way that it was like, oxys and heroin and whatever at that time, that just was the quickest thing that I could do. And right at that point, nothing was off limits. And like, now it's like, but I can catch myself, even just negative thought patterns, negative thought loops. Like we can indulge in our misery to the point of where it's an addiction for most people. Scrolling on Instagram, swiping on Tinder, whatever it might be. We have a world of vices that we live in, and that is that the falsehood of, you know, a constructed world that we are in that takes us away from ourselves, you know? And so like for me too, as an entrepreneur, how do I even apply that to like life and business and everything else?
Yeah.
Well, you know, writing down, this is actually my journal. I'll write it in the morning, like my goals for the day, my ideal self, like who do I want to represent? Like somebody that's honest. So I look at principles like this week, I write down 5 principles at the start of the week, right? So if for that week it's honesty, you know, then I would say we all kind of know what the definition of that is, but really it'd be like the definition of that at the time for me. If it was open-mindedness, you know, what's the definition of being open-minded for me at that time? If it's compassion or, you know, patience, those are all like things that we can aspire to. And that's how I can get back and get more to this true self. And then of course, beyond that, it's a lot of action. And what that looks like for me is diet, exercise, you know, reading, listening to positive stuff, you know, positive music, not like to the point where it's like cheesy or anything, but like, you know, like if but like if I'm in the gyms, you know, I'll throw something on, get me hyped up, like some Tupac or something, maybe just for a little bit, or some like Metallica or Tool. But like, I'm not gonna be listening through that all day, because it's just like, you know, that has a certain vibration that, you know, continues throughout the day. So like,
no, I get it. And everybody, you know, everybody encourages, and that's what I talk about. Find things that encourage you. Find those things that encourage you and tap into that. I got to ask you, man, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this. Can you take me to the lowest moment in your addiction where it could have gone either way? You know, because a lot of people, and we talked about this a little bit ago, there are some people that have an addiction, and it's that one hit of heroin that costs them their life or costs them everything. And do you have a moment where it's like, yeah, that I was there?
Yeah. I mean, I have so many, it's hard to choose, but no, like it was 2016. I was living in Crested Butte, Colorado at the time. I'd been clean from like everything for a while, 2012. And then kind of my old party ways started to creep in. So at the time I was working on the mountain. I was a ski instructor in the winter and fly fishing guide in the summer on the rivers out there. And so like on the outside, it's like, oh man, you know, I have all these cool jobs that people would want. And it was like that kind of, but you know, I was in a relationship and things seemed to start getting normalized, right? But I would just, you know, drinking and just partying a little bit, but you know, not any way like I was, right? I thought I had it under control. And so, you know, a series of events happened, which like life happens. And, you know, the girl I was with at the time, who I thought I was in love with, and I don't say this in any type of like self-pity or definitely a victim consciousness type, but like, you know, had cheated on me with this dude she worked with. And I was super crushed by it, of course. And like, you know, that started a kind of a downward spiral. We broke up. I moved out of the house that we were living in together. She had a kid. I was super attached to him, you know, and I had this vision of what this life was going to be like, you know, a family. And I finally like got the pretty girl I always wanted. And I'm living out in the mountains and I'm a fishing guy. And I had this like dream, grandiose vision of like my life and myself. And when those things started to get taken away from me, and I actually, through the way I was reacting to the situations too, played a huge part in it. All of a sudden I'm like not living there anymore. I'm sure a lot of people have been here before. I'm like sleeping on an air mattress at my buddy's house. And because I'm just trying, like, who is another fishing guide. So I'm like sleeping on an air mattress, started drinking again, eventually lost my job, like couldn't get any clients at the place that I was guiding at. And it started this downward spiral that happened, you know, in like a 2 to 3 month span. So like eventually I was out at the bar, and in Crested Butte, there's like the population is like 7,000 people, right? And there's a bar called
Yeah.
Talk of the Town there. It's on the main drag, Elk Avenue. And I see her there at the bar, and I'm like, you know, drunk, and I like start trying to talk to her, and she's like, has me follow her outside, basically. And the dude that she was with, it turns out it was another guy. Like, it was just, she went through some stuff too, I guess, because she had just like gotten with somebody else after the dude she slept with, cheat on with me on. But anyways, he was outside and jumped me from behind, broke my nose, like, you know, fractured my skull. I had like the raccoon eyes, you know, if anybody's gotten like just beat up, right? Like that's all, there's no way to do. I was knocked out and, you know, assaulted, and, you know, he got charged and all that stuff. And I like woke up in an ambulance and just completely like, this happened in front of the bar. It's 2 a.m. I felt like everybody in town saw it, right? Completely humiliated, destroyed. Like the girl that I thought I was in love with, like I was like, she had me got beat up, or like,
Yeah,
it was insane. And then, you know, so I'm on the ambulance, and like I come to, and the EMT's like, hey, you're in a lot of pain here. Your face, your nose is broken, and some other stuff, and we're gonna give you this pain medication called fentanyl. We just need your permission first. And of course, you know, I was like, I'd been clean off of the opiates for a while, for some years. And, you know, I was like, please, God, anything.
yeah.
And that just like started this, you know, then it was off to the races, right? And so then I'm out of the hospital in 3 days. And, you know, it was an altercation at bars. So like my name was in the paper with this other guy. And like, I had 2 black eyes. My face was like the size of my head was the size of a watermelon. Dude, I felt like the Phantom of the Opera, like, or the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I had like a hood on. It's winter. And so, yeah, completely humiliated and suicidal, and like all these things that I was identified with, you know, after a lot of like, you know, looking back in therapy and everything else, I was identified with myself, not me, the way I tried to be now.
Right.
I was identified with, I'm her girlfriend. I'm going to be this kid's dad. Like we're going to have this place together. I have this cool job. So I'm like the fishing guide with the girlfriend. And I identified myself with all these things, which I actually am not. And when those things got ripped away from me, I'm left with asking myself, who am I? And that was a really harsh realization, because I had no idea who I was. And so I ran from, or, you know, so the only way to deal with that, and I think this is where a lot of people are today, you know, it's because there's everybody's identified with something. I'm a this, or I'm a that, I'm a anti this, or I'm a something that. I believe in science, I believe in God, like, you know, and they're just identified with these things.
Yeah.
And it's causing a lot of pain and divide. But so ultimately, you know, I got out of the hospital, you know, eventually a day later, they gave me a prescription. A couple days later, I found the dope man. And then like 5 days later, I was found dead behind a toilet in Walmart bathroom, and got revived with Narcan. And it's not like that was the first time that happened too, by the way. But like this time I had nothing, had no job, had no money. My face is destroyed, and, you know, literally found behind the toilet in February. And, you know, this might be a little bit graphic, but just give people like I had to go into this bathroom because it's so cold that I couldn't find any veins in my arms. And so I had to get in there to warm up. Wow. To then like try to desperately find a way to get high. And, you know, and I was it's not like I was just at the point where I didn't care what happened. And if I didn't wake up, it would have been a favor, because I had to had to go through the pain of living again. But I didn't have the guts to just like jump off a bridge or something. I wouldn't want to do that. So, but yeah. And so I went to treatment. So that's when I called the director guy, and he told me I got to get honest with myself. So I went back to treatment, was there for a couple months, and then was like, man, I had this this is when Clay took over. When Clay takes the driver's seat, Clay messes stuff up, because I think I know how things should operate, instead of like letting go and letting the universe kind of guide me. When I'm like, no, it has to be this way. In certain things I am, yes, but when it comes to like running my life in a lot of ways, I can really mess stuff up, especially when I'm like not fully in a right minded thinking. So I started to get some control back in my life, started to feel better, got my health back, my body back. I was like, oh, I'm going to go back out to Colorado, and I'm going to go back and show everybody this is me filled with pride. Just to, elaborate, when I'm like filled with pride and ego and just trying to run the show, it usually doesn't end well. And so I ended up going back there, was there for like 5 days, and ran into this dude and this old lady that was like the old, kind of like the old meth lady in town. There's one in every town in Kentucky and West Virginia.
That's right.
Yeah. And so and next thing you know, I relapsed and was back in the hospital. And then that's when I finally opened the door to just being like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'll do whatever. And I thought I'd been there before plenty of times, but at a certain point, once there's a moment of surrender, and you kind of alluded to it. And I said, the gift of desperation and grace. This is like how I started to develop some sort of spiritual connection, because it got back to the things that I could control. Clearly, I couldn't control my life at the time. Clearly, I couldn't control my drinking and using, no matter how long I tried to tell myself that, hey, I could just have a drink. Sometimes I would, sometimes I'd have 10, and then eventually that would lead to the other stuff, right? So I just kind of gave up on all that stuff and was able to start fresh, and just I came back to Nashville, and that's when I really, really went all in on developing a purpose for myself, which turned into entrepreneurship. I've always been an entrepreneur. And so I was rebuilding my life here, doing my best to stay humble. I was working construction, Nashville, summer, 100 degrees. And, I was great. I got another guy in recovery, gave me the job, and I was grateful for the opportunity. But at that time in 2016, podcasting started getting big, and you started to hear about these other entrepreneurs, like, Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone, and like self-development people. And so I just started to read a ton of books, watch, videos and educational material, and really went above and beyond to try and educate myself on this whole new economy that we're moving into, which is a digital economy. I had tried the going back to school. I did that 3 times and finishing and that, and then being like, well, I still have debt on that I'm still paying, so that whole system is no longer valid, in my opinion. It's a great way to learn social skills, but unless you're super plugged in with being set up, or if you want to be a doctor too, which is awesome, you need more doctors, but that's a lot of school and a lot of debt, and there's a lot of other ways to make money and help people, which is my end goal with helping them to learn about markets and trading and finance and just different ways, that options to make money today. And it gave me a purpose, reading about this stuff, being inspired, when I had nothing. I'm just on a construction crew. We were putting irrigation lines on new construction sites. So, somebody build an apartment building, and then we would put all the irrigation lines and stuff. And so, it gave me something to tap into. I'd work all day, and instead of coming home and doing Netflix, which I did for a little bit, and felt empty again, felt the same way I was feeling when
you just filled your mind with different things. You just filled your mind with entrepreneurial content. And Clay, I have a friend of mine that knows a lot of stuff, and he said, man, I'm going to tell you something. A lot of what I learned on YouTube. I would just consume YouTube videos. I would just watch, and I would be smart enough to pick it up, and I'm like, dude, that's brilliant, because again, to your point, Clay, and I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but jump in. But that there has never been a more powerful time in our country's history, in the history of the world, where that can happen. And so, man, as we wrap this conversation, I want you to, if you don't mind, there's great intentional encouragement about what you just said and how you kind of beautifully just wove all that together. What's your biggest piece of intentional encouragement?
Man, that it's okay to make a shift. It's okay to make a shift and change things and like continue to change and continue to grow. It's not okay to just do it tomorrow and do it the next day, do the next thing. But in order to do that, we have to know where it is that we want to go. Like, and that's why I continue writing in my journal every morning, write my goals down, my targets, my gratitude, because it's a map that like at least gives me some direction. The majority of people, if you start doing this, I try to do it at the morning and the night. I write down my goals, gratitude, like victories for the day. Like and those victories are like, took the garbage out, walked my dog, went to the gym, answered all my emails, read 10 pages, followed my diet. Those are victories that are going to stack up and wins that are going to stack and stack and stack. And next thing you know, you're not using dope anymore. You've got your own business. You have a house. You're getting on podcasts, right? But like from where I was when I was working construction, it seemed like, I thought I'd be way further along than I am now. But that's what we always think, right? But at least I was dreaming. And that's the thing. We are so disconnected and even like encouraged in a negative way, like some negative encouragement not to dream, that it's not okay to think big. That's not okay to be like, when we were kids and you wanted to be an astronaut, you wanted to be the chief of the police, or you wanted to be the Wall Street trader. And that's like, man, you don't even hear that stuff anymore because it's more everybody's pushed into this box of being average. And I realized that, fortunately, in a way that almost killed me, and that's why I say I'm grateful for the experience, that I don't have anything to lose by going for it. And you don't have anything to lose by trying to be the best version of yourself every day. Like my big prayer that I do in the morning is, please help me to be the best version of myself today. Like whatever, I'll go hang out with friends or even go like have dinner with the family. And before I go, it's just like, help me to be the best version of myself, which I've started to identify what that is. And if I live in that space, then everything else is going to be taken care of because, we were created to be able to deal instead of like being consumed with fear, anxiety, and depression. So like, it's okay to like pivot and make a shift. And in fact, like you should do that, figure out what it is. But like, I would just ask your listeners, like, what do you got to lose? If you feel like it's not working out, it's going to take a while. I'll be straight up with you. It's going to take a while, but so does sitting on the couch for another year. And,
yeah, you're 100% right, man. I love what you just said. What a beautiful way to end our conversation. There's nothing to lose in going for it. Man, that is so cool. Tell folks how they can connect with you, Clay. Man, I'm indebted to you for telling your story here, man. I'm so appreciative and indebted. Tell folks how they can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. Now, just to remind everybody, like you have a story to tell. Everybody has a story to tell. I realized that I was doing, it doesn't have to be a story like mine. I was doing everybody that, follows me and that knows me a disservice by kind of hiding that. And, when we tell our story and whatever it is, it's like, hey, man, I've been there too. Like, this is what happened to me. Isn't that crazy? It's like we can actually even kind of laugh about it, and be grateful for it instead of hiding it like it's something to be ashamed of. So whatever your story is, get out there and connect with somebody because we're meant to connect with each other. So, the best way to connect with me is, I didn't mean to make that segue. So
no, you're good, man. That's good.
But the best way to connect with me is my Instagram, probably. It's clay.b.hodges. And then, you have a link tree. It's a link there. And it has all the links to my trading telegrams. That's where I do most of my, trading and market analysis. And I have a YouTube, running Forex. And hit me a message on Instagram and be like, dude, I heard your podcast and this is what I got going on. And, you know, I'd love to connect with you. So, you know, I'm not the type of person that, you know, like I just said, I am doing this to connect with other people because it helps me. It helps me think about myself and know that we are all in this together, despite what is trying to be sold to us, just to bring us back to the start of this, you know, the fear and the division and all that. It's done on purpose to divide us. Because if we can start to connect with each other, no matter what our beliefs are, things are going to get a lot better, and we'll be able to actually be the creators of our lives rather than the reactors of our lives. And, you know, we're living in a nuclear reactor right now.
Man, you have said it. Clay Hodges, this has been great. This has been really great conversation. Again, I'm indebted to you for taking us where you took us today, inspiring and encouraging people. That's exactly what this podcast is about. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining us on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.